In
You can add the bumper afterwards.
yeah,
Okay.
check. Okay.
That's you.
Bienvenidos y bienvenidas. Welcome to PNA KXU, Poor People's Revolutionary Radio on 96.1 on the dial in East Oakland and streaming live online at www.poormagazine.org/radio. This is Muteado, your co-host, formerly houseless, con voces de migrantes en resistencia, with Poor Magazine in studio, with Poe, formerly houseless, Pa Briscala, mi canala la tiny.
Evicted, swept, and kicked. Evicted, swept,
And
kicked. Because settler towns like these don't give an ish. I'm tired of being swept. I'm tired of being kept in a cage if I don't go along and if I dare to show my rage. You won't even get that little bed. So, yeah, this is some serious violence, and it's exhausting, family. They're sweeping in the occupied village of Ochun at the Oakland 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 times a day. We've got politicians coming at us talking about how they're cleaning us away. Where are you going to go? Where are we going to go? They took away our homes. They swept us to the road. We can't afford the rent, but they threw away our tents. What you trying to do, sweep us all to death? We're going to be listening to one of our relatives, Michael, a father, a husband, a lifelong Oakland resident, about what just happened to him. Ruthless Radio reporter.
Hello, my name is Michael. Where I was located at, they did a sweep. It's me and my kids and my wife, and we really had nowhere to go. It's hard to find a house at this time, so we just need help, until we can get our paperwork and things together. My wife get our IDs. She has seizures. And thank God my kids are at school, so I'm trying to get things together for a roof over our head, so they'll know no streets, no anything.
Where were you? You were in an RV.
Yes, I was in an RV. It was a family's RV. So Monday morning I woke up, sent the kids off to school, and the police knocking at the door saying everybody has to evacuate.
Wow. And they took it all.
And they took it all. My kids' clothes.
Did they give you? So right now we're in the Hopefulness Hotel Fund. We work in to keep you at least housed with your family, and then we're trying to get you back to long-term housing. You have a Section 8 certificate?
Yes, I do. And all I need is, I need to find a place. My wife gets her ID and just find a place and pay the deposit, and we're in. I have one foot in the door, but one of them is lagging behind.
You just heard Michael, one of hundreds of lifelong Oakland residents, of San Francisco residents, of Vallejo residents, of LA residents who are basically being swept to nowhere. Yeah, to nowhere. Because sweeping us from one side of the road doesn't mean we disappear. I just want to lift up that Ruthless Radio is a poor people, houseless people led media project of Poor Magazine, because we need to speak for ourselves. No more about us without us. No more talking about us like this colonial Ken Houston is doing right now. Talking about houseless people like we were trash, equating us with trash. Also, just to lift up that the Homefulness Hotel Fund does need support. It's only supported by the people. These non-profiteers and politicians have no solutions for us. Poor and houseless people have our own solutions. Homefulness is a solution. It's housing 25 youth, adults, and elders right now. Wood Street Commons is presenting a solution. There are solutions that are led by poor and houseless people. If you happen to be a landlord who has a Section 8 apartment and or you want to contribute, please email poormag@gmail.com. to help Michael and his family get housed, and continue to show up and stand up and speak up, because this isn't over. And you took away our homes and you swept us to the road, and you don't got money for a rent, but you took away our tents. What's you trying to do? Sweep us all to death.
On today's podcast of Poor People's Radio, we will speak with houseless warriors from the Vallejo Homeless Union. In Vallejo, where we lost ancestors, James Edward Oakley, after he was run over by a bulldozer. Then we will hear from youth poverty scholar Tiburcio Garcia on the Gen Z Revolutionary Warriors tactics in the revolution to take back Nepal and the Philippines, who incorporated an anime character in their liberation. All of that and much more.
So we have the blessing and the honor to bring in comrades, fellow houseless, formerly houseless warriors from the Vallejo Homeless Union. Welcome, poor folks. Welcome to Poor People's Radio, Poor People's Radio family.
Thank you for having us.
Hey
Hello.
guys.
For show. First of all, maybe Sean, you could just introduce yourself, and are you currently struggling with homelessness yourself, and maybe tell us a little bit about, the work of Vallejo Homeless Union.
Sure. I'm Sean O'Malley. I'm president of the Vallejo Homeless Union. And yeah, I am currently homeless. I have a trailer that I live in, but I was just swept. We were swept off the street we were at about a week ago. And they continued to follow us around that day. We were moving around to different spots. They told us we can't go there, can't go here. Then they told us the place we could go, but they're just going to sweep that. And a lot of people get there anyway. Keeps them employed. You know what I mean?
That part. Exactly.
If people get together and get some kind of community, then they sweep it. They don't want that. They don't want people to get together for strength,
That's so real.
That's what they do.
Yeah.
Here, same as over there,
Yeah.
They don't do 5 or 6 a day. They do one about every week or 2 weeks, but
Wow.
it's not as big as Oakland. But there's no camps left out here. There's only one because it's on private property, and they're working on that right now, trying to get around it.
Wow. So, and Eli, thank you as well. Do you want to introduce yourself and what your personal story at all?
Yeah, I'm Eli. I'm a founding member of the Vallejo Homeless Union. I've been through a lot in a lot of different states. I was houseless in Philadelphia and in New Orleans, and it was a long time ago, considering that now that I'm a mom, it feels like I've been a mom for 20 years, even though my oldest is only 6. But I've never forgotten that feeling. And I've been poor for much longer than that. And so coming to Vallejo, there's a lot of reasons why I wanted to join the Vallejo Homeless Union, but I think that feeling of just need, you have to do it, you have to come together, you have to respond to what is happening is probably the most prevalent. That and the friendships that I have with Sean, with other people, it's my community, so we have to fight back together that way.
Ashe. That's what's up. Well, I just want to sidebar, a very important aspect of this is just lifting up the fact that movements like the Vallejo Homeless Union, Poor Magazine, poor people-led movements, Wood Street Commons, these are acts of resistance, and they are also acts of being in community, because we know that we can't fight this system alone, and that these politricksters are endlessly coming for us. And hater neighbors, let's be real. It's not just the politricksters. It's not just the police. That's real. That's what happened to me and my mom for years. People would call the police on us. There's those homeless mother and daughter sleeping outside my house. That's going to bring down our property values. So I want to lift up that the movement of us being together in resistance is a really important one. Can you tell us, Sean, a little bit about James Edward Oakley for those of us listeners and maybe listeners who didn't know about his story, who
Sure.
he was and what happened?
Sure. He was a homeless man. He was about 35. He was a friend of mine. I know him for about 3 or 4 years before this happened, and he was living in a structure that he had over in the field that they were going to sweep. And they posted, papers and flyers about the sweep, so everyone knew he was there. Everyone knew he was going to get swept. And just a side note to that, he was in a Jeep. He had a Jeep that he was living in, and the police took that. And then he moved into a kind of a concrete shelter for a garbage can. There was no garbage can in there, so he moved into there. They made him move out of that. You know what I mean? And then he was made a structure, and they were going to make him move out of that. But before they did, that morning, they were, bulldozing the garbage, and they bulldozed him along with it. And from what I hear, there was eyewitness accounts of he was alive at the time, screaming, and they were yelling at them to stop because there was someone in there, screaming, and the police told him to shut up. And there was police and city workers on the scene. It's just a terrible situation. And there's been no investigation whatsoever about it. And we think that's criminal. No one's been held accountable at all.
Thank you.
Because, again, he's a homeless man, a black homeless man, so no one cares. And even worse, after his death, they wrote an article trying to smear his name after his death, saying he was in prison and, he was a drug user. He was in prison 30 years ago. So it has nothing to do with, what happened. And I thought it was just disgusting the way they tried to smear a dead man. You know what I mean? Who was innocently just sleeping,
Thank you.
at the time. And we are going to demand for an investigation. We think we're going to have another rally for it, but
Thank you.
they should. I mean, it's
Right.
outrageous,
Right. I think it's really interesting just to name that in these cases of polarized terror, they do the same thing. They try to build up how this person was a criminal,
Yeah.
or they were sketchy character, and like somehow,
Like that makes
Many-
it somehow okay to
Right.
kill him.
right.
You know what I mean?
So it's really terrifying that the same tactics are used. I think it's really important to name that. And I mean, you're literally like, when I hear this story, I'm almost unable to speak, and I just want to lift up his spirit. And I also want to name Cornelius Taylor, another relative
Oh,
in so-called Atlanta, almost within a month of James, who was run over by a bulldozer in a sweep, and people knew he was there.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, before both of them, Shannon Marie Bigley off the I-80 freeway in so-called Fresno. So this isn't unusual. That's what's so sick about it, right?
Yeah. Really.
Right.
Should be
Can-
unusual.
Right. Can you tell listeners about some of what's going on, you or Eli, about some of what's going on in terms of what we talked about at the Crushing Wheelchairs premiere, in terms of currently the lawsuits that you had and what's going on with that? What does your resistance look like?
You want to go?
Sure. Well, we've only been in existence for a little more than a year. I think we came in pretty strong against the city in terms of lawsuits because Grants Pass had just passed, which I know, as everyone knows, gave the go-ahead to criminalize homelessness for cities here in the Ninth Circuit. So we filed a lawsuit. That one was dismissed for technicalities, and then we filed another, which we wound up winning, and that was the first injunction that was ever secured for a houseless person, preventing their eviction since the Grants Pass ruling.
right on.
Yeah, so that really, I think, became a defining moment for us. But I will say, and we've had another lawsuit since then. We did get a temporary restraining order for that one. We didn't get the injunction, but I think that really we're always trying to pivot. We're always feeling that we have to always, reposition and walk that tightrope between trying to see what we can do on the community level, trying to see what we can do on the municipal level through, gaining support and trying to get some leverage to get them to change what they're doing here and going to court.
The lawsuits get their attention.
Yes.
That's the one thing that gets the city's attention. Now we're doing the lawsuits to make them obey their own law,
Thank you.
basically,
Thank you.
and it's ridiculous that we have to do that. Only then do they. Once we sue them in court, then they'll obey what they're supposed to do anyway.
Exactly.
And it's ridiculous. So yeah, and we got more lawsuits in the mind of making, right?
Yeah, it's tough because
But-
we do it all ourselves. We do get support from the California Homeless Union, but it's hard for people who aren't lawyers to take on a lawsuit.
We're getting better at it, though.
We're getting better at it. Yeah, you're gonna go to street lawyers.
And these are pro se lawsuits. Is
Yeah.
that what?
Yeah.
So they're like in pro per.
Yeah.
I just want to lift up to fellow jailhouse lawyer outside of jail without a degree, Robbie Powelson, and Jeremy Miller and some of the other warriors who are trying to help relatives on the street do these injunctions and these estoppels, because really it is all we have. And when you brought up Grants Pass versus Johnson, I don't know if listeners and viewers actually understand the seriousness of that. And shout out to RAP and to others, but basically that literally put in to the highest, court of law in the occupied Turtle Island Americlan that houseless people's bodies were no longer considered human.
Yeah, it opened the floodgates.
Right. We had no right to be protected under the 8th Amendment. And it's really deep because, even though I call it the Constitution, because I think it is by the Stealing Fathers, it is a document that supposedly protects, these basic rights, right?
Yeah. Unless you're homeless.
Exactly. I don't know if you wanted to ask anything more. Yes.
Well, just again, what are some of the ways that folks are organizing? And I know the good work that you guys are doing. That, and also, it was said too in that meeting that we had when we were showing crushing wheelchairs that sometimes they say that we're service resisting, even though we know even here in Oakland they were not giving resources to people or realistic resources. Like we say over and over again, they give us these BS temporarily housing again, like our lives are temporarily.
Yes, exactly.
Can you
The
speak on that, on
resources-
what Vallejo is doing?
We don't even have.
They have no resources. one of the things that they say that
We don't have
other
any.
cities are bringing their homeless people here, but that's
Oh,
ridiculous
please.
because there's no services here. Why would they want to come here anyway?
I mean, ironically,
what I mean?
it's actually the opposite. I mean, Vallejo, we ship everybody out because we have no resources. So
And they
if
offer
anything-
nothing. They put up a paper of resources, which when you call, it's just a list that everyone's on, and they offer nothing. Nothing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's people wait probably 2 years minimum if they want to get housed. We just had an
Wow.
emergency shelter that opened with 125 beds, but even the PIT count counts us at over 700, and that's
Wow.
doesn't include. So in the PIT, they only counted 6 kids. Like we have, 700 or something like that through the district. So it's and the emergency shelter doesn't accept families, doesn't expect people who can't self-care, which in that environment really means sleeping in
That's the
congregate
real
living
hidden
with,
homeless is the children,
right, we
because
get
they don't want to
children,
list them as
family.
homeless. The parents are afraid. You know what I mean? So they don't.
Right.
But there's a lot of them.
But
Yeah.
realistically speaking, at our this new the new emergency shelter that doesn't accept a huge portion of our population, is full anyway. So
Yeah.
there's really
Wow.
nowhere for people to go, even temporarily. There's really almost no hotel vouchers. We've got a lot of nonprofiteers that, tout programs and go in front of city council and say they're doing this and that, but
They do nothing.
it's very, very rare that anyone even gets a voucher for a week. I think that's kind
Wow.
of the best. Yeah, we've had to beg for one family and make a huge fuss and a huge email campaign just to get her a voucher for 1 week. Her and her two
Wow.
kids. So
Just two
Damn.
kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
One with
there-
autism as well.
yeah, there's nowhere for people to go. Literally.
Isn't that, and when you're talking about the emergency shelter, is that what Sister Lori was bringing up about the 7.2 million or something?
27. I think.
6.8.
27.
6.8 to operate it.
Yeah.
Oh my
just to
God.
operate it for 2 years. Yeah, she was at the meeting where the city council approved the operator of the facility, and it was
Oh my
6.8 for 2 years, and they're having
Oh.
problems already. So it's
Right.
the fourth month,
Wow.
5th month.
Wow. I mean, and also shout out to Lori Herrera and the work of, mixed race, mixed collective, excuse me, and just all the work, Auntie Kim Del Campo and
Yes.
other warriors
Right.
out there who are, who never stop, fighting these politricksters with their,
The reason they're having so many problems is because the same reason as always. They never consult homeless people or unhoused people
Mm.
for the solutions that only they would know. You know what I mean? They
Say
never.
that,
They think they know
John.
better. How could
Yep.
they?
that part, that
How
part.
could they know better? It's impossible.
Thank
You know what I
you.
mean?
Thank you.
Until they
Oh,
do, it's never going to be.
well,
Never
there
gonna,
you go. That
never going to work.
Sean said it. Until they listen to us, you're not going to actually be able to house us because there's nothing that's rooted in what we
Right.
call poverty scholarship. That knowledge that you don't get, from going to a professional development as an antisocial worker. You get it from the life, right? The life of living in these forms of trauma and struggle. We're running out of time, family, but I really want you to come back and can you tell
Yes.
listeners and viewers where they can support you, how they can support the work that you all do? Because that's life-giving work.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
follow us on Instagram. Feel free to send us an email. We have email campaigns all the time. They're really helpful. So we do have on our Instagram, we need to put another post, but we often will list the email addresses for the city council and city management. Keep an eye on our socials and reach out to us via Gmail. It's vallejohomelessunion@gmail.com.
Oh, and on IG, Vallejo Homeless Union.
Yeah.
Thank you, family, so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you for all the work you guys are doing.
Yeah,
Yep.
appreciate you. And we'll talk really soon.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Indeed.
All right. Talk to you later. You're
you.
listening, you're viewing Poor People's Radio. That's PNN, not CNN, people. Poor People's Media that's created by us for everybody else. All the listeners and viewers, we really appreciate you and love you. We need to fight and resist this dehumanization of our bodies. The story of James Edward Oakley should never have happened. And just holding his spirit right now and sending a smoke and love, and to all our relatives fighting this violent war on the poor in this moment of so much colonial terror. I also want to shout out to all the warriors who are standing on the front line, from so-called Chicago to Los Angeles and beyond, saying no to this violent colonial terror of these false borders, and to our relatives in Palestine, and Congo and Haiti. So we want to shift gears a little bit as we go global.
Yes. International.
Because we know that the war on the poor doesn't stop.
No.
One of our youth scholars, we know we have the Youth Poverty Scholars through Decolonize Academy and Poor People's Youth and Media Project. But one of our formerly houseless youth poverty scholars, Divorcio, aka my son as well, is one of those Gen Z, right, revolutionaries. And in the most recent beautiful resistance movements that happened in Nepal and then the Philippines and possibly another location, but definitely those two locations on Mama Earth, there was the use of an anime character in their liberation movement as a very serious icon of change. And so Tibu's going to break that down. Tibu, tell us what happened in Nepal, and tell us, first of all, what happened in Nepal. Tell listeners and viewers who maybe weren't watching that as carefully.
Okay. All right. Hello. So basically in Nepal, there was a revolution that happened because of all the corrupt politicians, and the young people people like myself, people who are not, you know, okay with accepting the regime, just marched up to the Capitol and marched up to the main buildings and kind of destroyed like the whole main town, pretty much, like graffiti and like broke stuff down and like set fire to things. And it scared enough of the politicians to the point where they took like private helicopters and jets like away, and so they kind of cleared out they cleared out the main area. And so after that, right, while they were celebrating, while they're doing this, and during, you know, the time while they were doing that, they hung up a flag. Now it's not specifically an anime character, but it's a flag from an anime, probably one of the most popular anime ever. It's called One Piece, and it's a anime about a like world where pirating is like the main thing, like because most of the world is ocean, it's like 90% ocean, and everybody's like pirating, right? Everybody's pirating. The flag that they hung up was the Straw Hat flag, and that's specifically important because the main character, Luffy, is a he's a pirate who doesn't necessarily just like plunder and like pillage, but rather he kind of unwittingly helps like overthrow terrible governments. So in multiple different like arcs of the anime, which are like kind of big chapters, he goes into an area or like a country where there's like a regime or like a terrible government. He sees that it's like, you know, how badly the people are being treated, and the people who are being mistreated like reach out to him and they're like, can we help, like can you help us somehow? And by the end of that arc, he ends up overthrowing the government and then putting it into the hands of the people who were being mistreated.
Oh,
Yeah. And so it's very, you know, very revolutionary, very, you know, anti-establishment, anti-government, anti-regime message that is repeated, you know, throughout the anime. And the villains, like the main villains, are the world government, who like goes to every country and like establishes dominance and, you know, forces their will upon the people who are living there. And so yeah, they're kind of showing that like this is a worldwide movement. This isn't just, you know, a few kids or a few, you know, youth running around and causing trouble. This is a movement that has been, you know, repeated through time, and that flag is one of the ways to represent the unity, you know. And so another interesting fact about, or funny fact about the specific Nepal revolution is that once they did get all the corrupt politicians out of power, they went on Discord, which for those who don't know is a like a social, like not social media, but like it's like a messaging service that's kind of like Skype, but there's like a lot more to it. And it's what a lot of people my age use. And you can vote in there. And so they voted for their new prime minister, or, you know, elected official, in the Discord area where it says voting. And it's so funny. I'm like, I was scrolling through Instagram, and I see just that tagline, you know, Nepal, like new prime minister voted through Discord. And I was like, what? And I look, and you see like, because I've done it before, like you voted on random stuff, like, oh, who gets to, you know, start up the next video game, or who gets to choose the next like game that we're gonna play or whatever. And you see the like 80,000 versus like, you know, like 350 versus like, and it's like, oh wow, so like all of them voted, like people mobilized, but through, you know, social media or through like these platforms, right? And that's also how we found out, right, about One Piece, you know, through TV, so it's just the ways of using of my generation using technology, media, you know, apps to counter a lot of what is going on right now. And, you know, I'm seeing a lot of that happen through TikTok too, you know, like people sharing messages about, you know, what's going on with them, what's going on around, you know, with Trump and everything. And it's a new wave, you know. And so that's just breaking down. If y'all saw that flag, you know, the black flag with the skull and I think Weston pulled it up, right? And then the straw hat. For those of you who aren't watching and listening, it's a black flag with like skull and crossbones, kind of classic pirate, but with a straw hat on, like a yellow straw hat with a red stripe. That is what that means. So in the future, right, if we see more revolutions happen and you see that flag, now you'll know what it means.
Oh, I just wanted to also lift up that one piece. If I'm not mistaken, there's a whole aspect of it that talks about poverty, right? That talks about the oppression of poor people. I don't know if you could tell you that a little bit more for folks who don't understand the creation of that character.
Well, yeah. So One Piece does talk a lot about poverty, and specifically how it's not just the fault of the people who are poor, but rather a systemic issue. And that's something that's really important that doesn't often get talked about in media, is that like, they're like, oh, poor people, and it's like, that's sad, and homeless people and everything. But Eiichiro Oda, the mangaka of One Piece, actually was able to kind of like almost break down and like explain simply how a government creates poverty, how a government creates the conditions for poverty and creates the conditions for lack of resources. For instance, in one of the recent arcs, which is like the Wano arc, he shows how when a new regime took over the old one, how they started actually, it's just kind of crazy. He showed an example of environmental racism, which is like, wow, or environmental classism, where he showed that the new regime put power plants and factories that had waste runoff into the natural land of the indigenous people who lived there, and they were getting sick and they were dying because they were drinking the water from the runoff because that was the only water that they had.
Wow.
Yeah, and then he also talked about there's this thing called the smile fruit, where it's like a fruit that is supposed to give you powers, but because it's manufactured, you have to have a bunch of people test it. So they gave it to the starving villagers to say, here's some fruit, but in reality, it would poison them. It would force them to like smile all the time, even though they were crying. And so it's just a lot of the things that we see, and it's like, oh, wow, that's just fantasy. That's just science. No, all of that stuff happens. We're talking about Flint, Michigan. We're talking about the indigenous people, the DAP, the Dakota Access Pipeline. We're talking about, all of these things, medical malpractice, Cancer Alley, medical malpractice of Black and brown people in the United States. All of these things do happen. And it's like, it's so easy to dismiss them as, oh, that's like somewhere far away, or they're right next to you. They're the things happening to your neighbors, the people who are living on the street, the people who are Black and brown, people who are just not able to speak up for themselves. And that's why I like this anime, because it does talk about a lot of those things, and it breaks them down in a very simple way, to even where I'll see comments about One Piece and they're like, hey, this is how I learned about, that the government does stuff to this people, because they never talk about it in school.
Yeah.
They never talk about it in even college,
Yeah.
You have to really be specifically, oh, like my major is, social studies, or like, specifically like
Political science.
Yeah, political science, exactly. But this anime breaks it down very simple, and it's one of the most popular in the world.
Wow.
So it's kind of like, I guess in a way, responsible for a lot of people in my generation learning about how much the government really screws us over at the end of the day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Moot, did you want to ask anything, or you good? Anything you want to add?
No, just thank you, because again, the anime and even just what's happening in Nepal is new to me.
Right.
I gotta stay up on my news game. Very important. I mean, thinking about ourselves, the old farts. Think about the Cuban Revolution. In the Cuban Revolution, art and poster making and the youth led that revolution. So again, it's making space for that new generation to express their political views in however way, shape, or form. But I love folks who use art for revolutionary change. And also I want to shout out to my nephew Tiburcio, who's also doing that here at Poor Magazine.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely an amazing visual artist, and is working to be a mangaka. But I do want to just
inspired a lot
Yeah.
by him and the way that he
Exactly.
does it. Sorry. Yeah.
no, that's real. And the work that we do at Poor and what Tibo's been raised on as my son and the son that dealing with homelessness and poverty that we went through. We needed to see iconography that actually spoke to realness. There isn't, that's kind of a lot of the iconography and the imaging that's fed to young people is just watered down and absolutely not rooted in truth. So,
Mhm.
right. So I just want to lift that up. And that's partly what has built Tibo into an amazing visual artist. I do want to say too, people should take heed from these liberation movements. When I was taught this by Tibu, I was very inspired. I know that we're very fractured in the United States, in our movements and in our communities, but it's really important to recognize, as my brother Mood said, that we do not only rely on these linear ways of organizing. One of the ways that literally Poor Magazine is here is that we're rooted in art, and always have been since me and my mom were on the street. Art and theater and poetry, hip hop, etc. These are our ways of resisting in a system that is set up to destroy our poor and houseless bodies. So, shout out to my beautiful sister Junebug and Queen Nande and Lori McElroy and Leger and so many others in the Welfare Queens and Poets and Teatro de los Pobres. That's what the movie's about. That's what Crushing Wheelchairs is about, which we're going to just give a quick PSW, but go for it.
I was just going to say, a little while back, right when everything was happening with Palestine, I drew the main character holding the Palestinian flag. And I think if it shows up on the camera, hopefully it does.
Yes.
And so that's him. That's Luffy. That's the main character. And I drew him with the Palestinian flag.
Oh.
And I created stickers of it and everything. So that's just, if y'all were curious about the main character, and because a lot of people were like basically the on TikTok at that time, the tagline was Luffy would fight for Palestine. Like,
Oh.
so just taking that away,
Absolutely.
it transcends, where we're at right now.
There you go. And the straw hat also just, thinking again about these symbols, right? Specifically of poor and indigenous people.
Yeah.
Right. The straw hat is that icon, right, of the pueblo, the community. Thinking about our relatives in Nepal, where they're dealing with deep, intense oppression and poverty, and the Philippines and all of these areas, right? Any last words you want to say, T, before we close out?
Yeah, just if you're young people around you are starting to talk about anime, and instead of being like, oh, like stop focusing on that and focus on like the revolution, try to reach out to them and be like, hey, like how can you incorporate anime into the revolution? How can you incorporate manga into the revolution? Because at the end of the day, these are ways that we're trying to express ourselves and that we enjoy. So how, instead of being like, okay, let's shift from that to activism, how can we include that with our activism?
Oh,
so yeah.
And speaking of that, relatives, we're going to be doing an endless amount of PSAs. That's Poverty Scholarship announcement for the coming up Crushing Wheelchairs. This is our new promo card. And as you might see, there's Brother Leroy, Uncle Leroy on the house. There's beautiful Sister Frances. All of us are formerly Houseless cast who created this beautiful movie. We urge you to come out. We had to rent the venue because we didn't get no Hollywood love. We didn't get no festival love. This is only because of community. So it will be November 9th at 12 noon with an opening ceremony in Occupy Del Amo, a.k.a. Frisco, at the Roxy Theater. Hey! Again, that's 12 noon, Sunday, November 9th. And then it's going to be in Uchun, a.k.a. Oakland, on December 6th at the New Parkway. Tickets start at $3. We're making them as cheap as possible. And Houseless Poverty Scholars get in for free. You know how we do. So hit us up if you need a comp ticket at poormag@gmail.com or DM our Instascam. And also, if you can't afford a ticket at $20, please pay it, because we got to raise that money to pay that rent. You already know
that part.
So yeah, this is a no budget movie, family. No budget, not low budget, no budget.
Yeah.
So please support us. Please come out. Please see this medicine. It's an act of emergency in this colonial time of terror. It honors the revolutionary ancestors like Louis Tomage, burned alive for sleeping outside. James Edward Oakley, our beautiful sister Angeline Green Eyes Swan out of so-called LA, the warrior Broken Cloud. Was one of our warriors from Poor Magazine who was 25 years on the street, service resistant, the non-profiteers called him. He was a warrior, and we lost him this year, but he is in this movie, so it's a tribute to him as well, and so many more.
Mhm.
We appreciate you so much. Crushing Wheelchairs. You can also go on Instascam at Crushing Wheelchairs Movie on IG, and or you just go to www.poormagazine.org and you can get your tickets there. So that's it.
Again, thank you, Weston, the ones and twos.
Whoop, whoop,
So
whoop.
that's all for this edition of Poor People's Radio. To get the complete podcast, go to Poor Magazine on SoundCloud or poormagazine.org or whatever you get your podcast from. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, X, Blue Sky at Poor Magazine or at Poverty Scholar or Poor News Network on YouTube. All power to the people.
Power. That's what's